Our last article today comes from Alex Donaldson. Alex Donaldson over at VG24 writes an article called "Can we get Lightgun games back in the next generation, please?" It's that time of the video game console cycle where we look forward to the next generation. The PS5 and the Xbox Series X are coming, and they've got names, and that means we can all sit around and dream of what we'd like to see from the generational shift. It'd be nice to see the machines focus less on hitting another resolution bump to 8K, and instead them doubling down on performance, for instance. When it comes to game franchises, I think Microsoft has a real golden opportunity to dig deep and bring back or reboot some old franchises. Fable, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Kazooie. But you know what I really want from the next generation, unlikely as it may be? I want Lightgun games to come back. The PS4 and the Xbox One console generation was the first since the 90s to not see the home release of a Time Crisis title. The PS1 and PS2 had multiple releases such, while the PS3 was blessed with the not so hot Time Crisis 4, which was actually a solid value for money bundling of the 3 different Namco arcade shooters. The series did get a fifth entry in 2015, but has remained arcade only, and with good reason. Lightgun games are difficult to do in modern hardware. It's nothing to do with the consoles, but rather in all modern flat screens. Their specification and refresh rate isn't compatible with traditional Lightgun tech, so the classics from the earlier generations don't work on new screens. While modern games require you to drape stupid ass TV sensors all over your TV, it's messy and it sucks. The Wii meant that Lightgun shooters had a brief renaissance on that platform, but for real accuracy you needed multiple sensors. Nobody wants to precariously tether 3 or 4 sensors around every edge of their $2 grand OLED TV and then still get worse accuracy than a CRT display from the 90s. That was Time Crisis 4's problem. Packing in loads of sensors drives up the cost of any Lightgun bundle, while the alternate is to market exclusively to the install bases of things like PSVR, a far cry from being able to bundle in a gun at a slight price premium, as in the 90s. VR shooters, while cool, also take away that social 2-player aspect of the genre. A 2-player point-blank showdown wouldn't be the same in VR. All of these factors combine to mean that it's no surprise that companies like Sega and Namco have elected to stop releasing arcade shooters on console as they continue to make new ones. Arcade exclusive spin-offs of films of popular games are becoming even more popular. They often deserve a home release. I think the time has come for a renaissance. People clearly want to play Lightgun games. This is why things like House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn and Time Crisis 5 exist, despite not getting console releases. In the time since arcade shooter home ports died off, some American companies have also gotten in the action with AAA shooters too. Raw Thrills, the company behind those big buck hunter games you get in dive bars, has spent the last few years releasing high-end shooters based on licenses like Aliens, Halo and Jurassic Park. On top of that, we're now in an age of constant re-releases and remasters, and there are a lot of 30-somethings with disposable income and enormous amounts of nostalgia for things like Virtua Cop and Point Blank. You only have to go into one of the arcade bar hybrids popping up everywhere to see that shooters always have the longest queue. But what about technical problems? Well, a solution might have arrived thanks to, of course, the enterprise and emulation community. Sinden Technology is a company that has come up with the appropriate named Sinden Lightgun. That's that back there, by the way. A new type of gun that works on modern displays. The way it works is deceptively simple. There's a camera inside the gun that looks at the screen, and with a small border that is drawn around the game display on screen, the camera can see the border, and from that can use some clever but simple software to calculate exactly where within those borders the gun is shooting. Or pointing. Even if you're standing off at a weird angle and with little calibration, you can use a little game resolution for the border, but the results are profound. Just take a look at a demo inside the action. Now, obviously this article will be linked in the description below. Go have a look at that. Go have a look at that. It's so accurate that it might actually outstrip the classic light guns of the 90s. The gun launched on Kickstarter last year, asking for $32,000, and ended up bringing in over $300,000. Oh, sorry. It also caught the eye of some bigger companies like high-end retro console manufacturer Polymega, which has licensed Sinden Technology for a light gun of its own. As the project reaches the phase where production samples exist and backers holding the final product in their hands is in sight, what started as something designed for PC light gun games and emulation now has a far wider potential reach. Beyond PC, Sinden Tech is already compatible with a variety of original hardware, like PS2, and its creator says support for other hardware, including newer machines, is relatively straightforward matter. With the arrival of this HD TV friendly light gun technology in a new generation, it honestly feels like it's time for the classic genre to get back in the living room. Companies like Sega and Namco should be eyeing up the Time Crisis 25th anniversary, or a House of the Dead trilogy re-release. They should be picking up a phone and giving Sinden a call to make it happen. This may all be a mad dream, of course. Game publishers have bigger fish to fry, and the great Guitar Hero driven plastic accessory boom and bust out of the Xbox 360, PS3 and Wii era undoubtedly contributed as much to the publisher trepidation around shipping little plastic guns as it did to landfill. But let me dream. Let next generation be return of the classic arcade shooter at home. You know what? I vibe with this. Very much so. Light gun. Whenever I walk into an arcade, and there's not many arcades in well, Scotland probably. When I walk into an arcade, the first thing I do is I go, "Where's House of the Dead?" What? No House of the Dead? What's this about? Oh look, there's Terminator something or other. I'll do that. Light gun games are awesome because it gives you. It's tactile, you know. It's not like shooting a gun with your controller. I mean, yeah, you're pulling a trigger, but you're not holding the gun out. Now, we're in Scotland, we don't have guns here. So it's the closest when I get to a power fantasy when I'm shooting zombies or when I'm shooting Terminators with a light gun. But as the article laid out, it is a technological issue. Now, Sinden Technologies has worked this out now. From what I can tell, and I may be wrong, Sinden Technologies is a bedroom operation. It's a guy operating out of his house, 3D printing the guns, basically making them by hand. I'm sure I went to look into one, and as a result, because you know it's a labour of love, but it's labour nonetheless. It is a bit more expensive. I'm sure it was something in the vicinity of like £80 over here, so maybe $100 US. I may be wrong. But I, you know, if it wasn't, you know, I'm not necessarily an emulator myself, so even if I wanted to back it, there's nothing I could really pump in it. Now, since the article was written, they did announce a House of the Dead remaster, I believe, and I'll try and look that up while I'm talking here. He says while stopping talking, I am so sorry. But it just goes to show that technology is there. Now, what would it benefit from having this on modern gen systems? Well, the multiplayer component, I mean, yeah, leaderboards are probably a good thing. But imagine if you had a game, you know, most light gun games are on rails, so you're going through a specific path. But imagine if you were playing a game where, say it's on a big massive map, 8 players, and there are 8 rail routes on that game. Routes where you can like see the other players and what they're shooting at, and you can try and, you know, pick off their targets one by one, so it can get competitive. Not just that, but there's some really good formulas out there. Now, I only ever played this for about 10 or 15 minutes, but one example would be Resident Evil Survivor. Again, I only played it for 10 minutes. I don't know what it was like, and furthermore, I was playing it with a regular controller using the D-pad, and there's nothing worse than playing a light gun game with a D-pad. But it really added in a survival horror aspect to it. Here we go. Here's an article from houseofthedead.fandom. Yeah, here we go. House of the Dead remake. The game was revealed on April 14th, 2021 and is scheduled to release later this year on Nintendo Switch. Sorry for pulling that face. I've got a Switch. I like the Switch. It's just it's really weird and disheartening to see it be a Switch exclusive. Like the original game, the remake is set in December 1998. Forever Entertainment retained the rights from Sega to develop and publish the remake, with Sega sharing a 50% of the revenue. The remake will stay faithful to the original House of the Dead story, while adding modernised graphics, voice acting, and gameplay adjustments. While the Nintendo Switch has been the only confirmed platform, there have been written reports that Stadia, Xbox One, PS4, PS5, Epic Games and Steam will also be platforms. Oh, and it also goes on to say a remake of House of the Dead 2 is also in development. I'm learning stuff live on air. But to touch back on the House of the Dead thing, I really want to play the new one, Scarlet Dawn. If you go and look up footage of that game, the graphics in that are amazing. Now, I'm not going to diss too much on the older games. I think there's an inherent charm in the terrible voice acting of the original games, particularly to Suffer Like You Did. If you've played it, you know. But yeah, I don't necessarily think the House of the Dead remake is going to be good without a Lightgun. So here's hoping to the future of Sinden Technologies. If it is an out of bedroom operation, you know, obviously that's a big undertaking. I hope someone approaches them. I don't think Mad Cats is a thing anymore. Turtle Beach. Imagine Turtle Beach comes on and says, "Hey, Sinden, here's a $20 million check for your technology." I'd take it. Or I'd be like, okay, tell you what, 10 million, and then I get 10% of profits from here on out. Something along those lines. But here's hoping to the resurgence of the light gun tech, because, you know, I feel like we're in an age where anything is possible. Anything can be, I was going to say researched, that's not a word. Anything can be brought back as long as it's utilised correctly. And I think that actually speaks out for everything we've discussed on this episode, actually. Everything we've discussed, all great ideas, all had their pros, all had their cons. It's just utilising that stuff properly in the larger space.